Good afternoon. It is a privilege to have each of you on the phone. I know you're coming to us, some of you from your cars in California, and some of you from your homes, and some of you from your offices. But thank each of you for joining us. We are privileged to have the Williams Group and two representatives from it, Joel Kimmel and Amy Castoro. And we've invited them for a very specific reason. And one of those reasons is that the subject matter in which they are experts has been a wonderful assistance to our firm for probably more than 20 years now, that I don't know that I've ever given much credit to the Williams Group in any conversations I might have had with you all. But their research and their content has been very valuable to us, and very specifically, Amy and Joel work with families that might range in average net worth from 20 million into the multiple billions of dollars, and they have a family coaching practice. I think if I remember right, you all have 20 or more coaches around the country. So right now, Amy, if I remember right, you're in New Jersey, and Joel, you're in California, and all throughout the country there are family coaches there and business coaches there that work with some of the more famous names in the country, and some of those folks that should be famous but aren't. But for our purposes, we put this conversation together as a way to hopefully just be a blessing to you all, and to stimulate conversation in an area that we believe is underdone nationally, and has great importance. And so to give you an idea behind that, before Amy and Joel get going, I just wanted to share with you, our firm today got a new client, and the new client lives in North Carolina. And the short course on that is the young man, I say young man, he's 58, the 58-year-old husband in this situation, who just inherited really about between $6 and $7 million from his father. He inherited it, and when asked why he hadn't acted upon anything since the time of the estate on late October last year, why he had not done anything from then to now, he said, "I hate my father, and if he were alive today, I'd probably kill him." And that is, as sad as that little statement is, family dynamics and the transmission of wealth from one generation to another is an art form. It's not automatically successful that wealth moves downstream. And Amy and Joel will share some content in that direction. But from our perspective, we're trying to do the best we can to facilitate the kind of dialogue and the kind of content that helps successful families stay that way through multiple generations. So Amy and Joel have been doing this, I think Amy for 11 years, Joel for 20 years. They have been working with these families, with these business owners, with charities, with larger institutions nationally, and just providing coaching services to them. So they're not a direct competitor to what we do. They're not in the investment business per se. They're in the family health, family financial health business. And so each of them, in fact, many of you got a book. Amy has a book with the founder of the Williams Group, Roy Williams, who, if I remember right, was an NFL football player that amassed some wealth and kind of jumped into this space. But if you all saw that book a moment ago, I know we've tried to get each of you a copy of it. If you don't have that yet, just let us know. We'll mail it to you if we didn't give it to you in person. But without further ado, we'll let Amy and Joel share some content with you that I hope is I know it's going to be good. And then there's a chat box, or a Q&A box, excuse me, at the bottom of your screens. You'll see a little Q&A box. If you have any questions or comments, if you can type those in, I'll see those during their conversation, and we'll allow some time at the end and try to have any of those questions answered. And we'll get you out of here in about 52 minutes and get you on your way. So again, without further ado, thank you so much, Amy and Joel, for the relationship you all have with our firm, but also just for taking time out of your day to provide this. Last thought, we plan to do a version of this, an extension of this conversation in 2023 in live format. So today is also just a teaser to a degree of the kind of things that might be valuable to discuss in person next year. So without further ado, Amy and Joel, thank you. Take it away.
Well, thanks Todd, for having us here. You know, Joel and I are always grateful for the opportunity to connect our passion, which is keeping families together, with this kind of an audience, because you know every one of our clients come to us with the fundamental question. They say, how do I transition this wealth without derailing their motivation? And what's astounding to us is that there's a remarkable gap between people wanting to have their wealth be a positive influence in the lives of their next generation, but very few are actually taking action there. So it's really it's why Joel and I and the other coaches really get out of bed in the morning, because we know that when families take proactive action, their relationships are better off for it. And if they are philanthropically minded, that philanthropy can change the world. So we're grateful for the opportunity to be here with everybody. I am going to share my screen here and have you take a look at, we'll walk through some slides that I think will give everybody a good understanding of why we do what we do. The organization, it might be helpful just to understand a little bit about the Williams Group. You're right, we've got about 20 coaches. We've worked with over 800 families. Very often it's generation 1 to generation 2, but we're currently working with families where there's 3rd and 4th generations. The business was started by Roy when he came out of the NFL, and he played for the San Francisco 49ers. And what he saw was that wealth was having an effect on families that was breaking his heart. You know, they could afford the best estate attorneys in the world, but yet still there was this impact that was pretty consistent. It's not just in the United States, but every culture has a name for this impact of wealth on families. In the US, we call it shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, but other countries call it from the stalls to the stars to the stalls again. And in China, they call it teacup to teacup. So when we look at this global phenomenon of the amount of wealth that's transitioning, it's just a huge opportunity for families to take a moment and start investing in the relationships that support the vision that they have. So today we're going to talk a bit about the role of family dynamics. We'll talk about how to see whether or not you're on the right track. We'll talk about some of the tools that we use, and we'll give you an idea of how you can start asking some really powerful questions of your next generation. I'd like to start with this 10-question quiz. So if you've got an ability to write down a yes or a no, I'll read the question and you can answer for yourself, and then we'll just tally up those yeses or nos at the end. This questionnaire, by the way, is based off of the research that the Williams Group did. It's a condensed version of a 50-question survey. But the first question, our family has a mission statement that spells out the overall purpose of our wealth. So just on a piece of paper, write a yes or a no. Second question, our entire family participates in most important decisions, such as defining a mission for our wealth. Our third question, all family heirs have the option of participating in the management of family assets. Assets can be, does everybody keep track of the boat keys? Or assets could be, we've got a hand in philanthropy. Assets is more than just money in this instance. Heirs understand their future roles, have bought into those roles, and look forward to performing those roles. Fifth question, heirs have actually reviewed the family's estate plans and documents. So that does not mean that they know how much or when, but they've got an idea of the playbook. Our current wills, trusts, and other documents make most asset distributions based on heir readiness, not their age. Our family mission includes creating incentives and opportunities for our heirs. Question 8, Our younger children are encouraged to participate in our family philanthropic grant-making decisions. And question 9, our family considers family unity to be just as important as family financial strength. And the last question, we communicate well throughout our family, and we meet regularly to discuss issues and changes. So this is where we say, okay, based on our research, add up your yeses and nos. And if you got 7 or more yeses, we would say you're well on your way, that you're in good shape and you're likely to be one of the 3 that actually transition their wealth successfully. Successfully meaning the family relationships stay intact and they maintain control of the assets. So if you got 4 yeses, then our data would suggest that you'll, with a reasonable investment of time and effort, that you'll have more confidence that family relationships will stay intact. If you got fewer than 4 yeses, then you've got an opportunity here to start taking some action because your wealth is at risk. And I know that's hard to hear, but it is actually one of the important pieces of why we do our work. It's so much easier to have these conversations when you're on this side of the daisies. We've learned that the Ouija boards are really tricky to interpret. So we say if you got a 4 or yes, that's actually a blessing. And keep going. Let's start thinking about taking some action. We've been around for 55 years now. Success, as I said earlier, means the family maintains control of the assets and the family remains unified. That was a standard definition that came across the 3,000 families that we worked with. We know that every family we work with has a pretty solid estate plan. What we find the challenge with that estate plan is it's designed to take care of assets, not the relationships. Almost everyone has a good estate plan, but very few are taking time to invest in the education, not education like how to read a portfolio, but the education of how do we maintain trust and communication in a family? How do we make sure that the next generation is getting out of bed with a purpose? And how do we make sure we're all on the same page? So there's $68 trillion. That's a low number. Just today, I heard it was up to 82 trillion. That kind of money is going to transfer. And so we've got a whole generation coming up behind us that we would suggest is largely unprepared, that much of the wealth they're going to receive is undirected. We had a family where the 2 brothers were in the family and the dad had a decent amount of money that he was passing on to them from his father. So it was generational. This was an investment that was created with penny stocks. Unfortunately, the mom and dad passed away suddenly. And so both brothers looked at each other and said, whoa, what are we going to do with this? And one of the brothers said, you know what? We can pay off our houses. We can put the kids in private school. And the other brother said, whoa, this has been in the family for generations. I think our job here is to make sure it goes to the next generation. I don't think we should spend it. They couldn't agree. 12 years later, they end up completing the litigation route. They actually owed the attorneys money. So that could have been dealt with if mom and dad took a moment and with 7 words, sell it when it reaches this price, or 3 words, don't ever sell it. Okay, 4 words. So the kinds of conversations that we're encouraging you to have don't have to include specifics, like in terms of how much or when. That's often the wrong conversation. The research revealed 3 main areas that families want to focus on beyond the estate plan. The first is trust and communication. So what we mean by trust and communication is that we're able to have the conversations we want to have openly and honestly. And sometimes there's some additional skill to add so that those conversations can happen. The second aspect we learned was heir preparedness or heir readiness. That means the next generation knows how to be a contribution to the wealth. Very often, Joel and I talk to the next generation, and what we learn is that they are growing up in the shadow of great wealth. What gets lost is how can they contribute, not just be a receiver of it. And then the third one that we focus on is, and that the research revealed was important, was family wealth mission statement. Are we all on the same page about the use and the purpose of the wealth? So here we've got about 5%. That's just crazy things that can happen. Maybe the business is not managed well. Maybe they didn't get great advice. Maybe a pandemic came along. But for the most part, the majority of the reasons why families are unsuccessful come down to trust and communication, heir preparedness, and values and mission. Trust and communication is not just in the center of wealth transition. It's in the center of ownership of a family business. It's in the center of making decisions together around philanthropy. It's in the center of what this story that you heard here is, you know what, I've grown up under this kind of control of wealth and I don't want any part of it anymore. In other words, the trust piece has to do with mom and dad not trusting that the next generation is going to be responsible with the wealth. The next generation is saying, I don't trust you to transition it well. One of the big pieces we focus on is, in terms of one of the tools that we wanted to share with you, is how can we make trust observable? How can we make trust manageable? And so I'll just open these up. Joel, maybe you want to jump in here and share a little bit about how you talk about trust and what we share with the families.
Well, thank you, Amy. Most of the times in our lives, and we can all have a moment if we take a time to think about it, when someone said, I don't trust you. And what happens to your, not only what happens to you, but what happens to the relationship and what happens to the new things that you can do together. And it's either all or nothing. Either I trust you or I don't trust you. And that we've found that most of the breakdowns in the families are their inability to trust each other. I don't trust you with money. I don't trust you with whatever, the keys to the car, whatever it is. So Roy came up with this diagram, which we've worked on and refined, that there's 4 distinct domains of trust. One is being reliable. Your reliability of when you say you're going to do something, you do it and fulfill the request that they've asked you to do. You have the competencies to do it. And the competencies also includes on time and by wins. And then you have the sincerity that you really care about doing this together with the other person in an aligned feeling of that. And care sort of is the umbrella that sort of covers all of those domains. So instead of when someone says, I don't trust you, a good answer is, well, in which domain? Reliability, competency, sincerity, or care? And they say, well, reliability, you're always late to meetings. Well, let's talk about that and look at how we can work together to bolster each other for me to be on time at the meeting. And the sincerity and the competency and the care stays intact in the relationship. Kids in families, when the parents say, I don't trust you, one good recommendation we would say is say, which domain are you talking about? Are your reliability, your competency, or your sincerity about doing what you say you're going to do? Amy has a great story about her son taking the garbage out on Tuesday. She has to promise to take the garbage out on Tuesday. And most of the time, or you should tell the story, but the point of this is this domain about the distinctions of trust and communication. It really even goes farther than that. If someone says to you, I don't trust myself about this, you can say in which domain? Your competency, your sincerity, your reliability, or do you really care about it? And it can open up a whole new conversation about working together to discover new ways to generate the actions where they become confident in that. This little diagram is probably one of the most powerful tools the Williams Group has. There's one quick story. We met. Father died, left an exorbitant amount of money to the son and the daughter, and the mother. The son and the daughter couldn't get along. The son took over the family office and kept growing the enterprise. And the daughter said she was an interior designer who never worked, but got $3.5 million a year passive income. And when we went to have the first meeting, they couldn't look at each other. It was like you could feel the static in the entire room. And so we started to ask him questions. And I asked the daughter, I said, how do you learn? And she says, well, I'm a visual learner. And I asked her brother, I said, can you draw a flow chart up here where the money comes in, what you do with it and how she gets her money? And he did, and everything changed. So sometimes the simplest questions are the most powerful questions. But then in the following conversations, when they talked about trust, they say the domain of sincerity. Very clear. Ames?
Yeah, that story about my son, I said, take the garbage out. And he's like, all right, I'll do it. I'll take the garbage out. And sure enough, garbage doesn't go out. Truck goes by. I'm sitting here in my office. I watch it go pick up speed past the house, actually. So I'm like, what happened? Now, this is in the heat of August. We had a stinky garage for the next 4 or 5 days. So I said, Julian, at 26, we need to have a conversation about your reliability, because you made a promise, but you didn't do what you said you were going to do. Instead, I could have gone down this whole character assessment of, you never do what I tell you to do, or you're so disorganized, or whatever. None of those character assessments are useful. But what is useful is to hone in on, hey, let's talk about reliability and its impact here. So that's like a really basic example of how we might use trust, but it's got a lot of implications here. We use it with executive teams as well. Families always ask, well, are we in good shape? Or are we not in good shape? So we came up with these kind of examples or things that we see in families that are really in good shape. So when there is a breakdown or when there's some kind of discord, the family has the skill to work through it. They're able to find alignment, not necessarily agreement, but they can live with it. They love spending time together. They enjoy traveling together. What we would recommend for a family like this is just capture those best practices, because they're floating around in the background. But when you articulate them in language, now you can observe them. Now you can measure them. So we suggest write them down and make sure they stay present. Keep adding to them. Catch them while they're doing something good. Sometimes we hear things like, my kids don't get along, or one of my kids is great with money, another one of my kids is not good with money. Sometimes we hear, we had a family where the kid moved to Australia. He really didn't want to be around his family. Then we hear things like, you know what, I'm the one that's got to make all the decisions. If I'm not pulling the strings, then everything will fall apart. Those to us are actually red flags. So we would say there's 2 levels to that. There's a yellow and there's a red. In a yellow family, you might find the advisors trying to help because they want to help the family move forward, but the family isn't able to have the key conversations they need to have with the advisor present. Sometimes they are not attending the family meetings, or if they do attend, they don't say anything. One of the biggest yellow flags is cordial hypocrisy. That's where they're saying yes on the outside, but on the inside, they're like, no way, I'm not going to get involved with that. Or sure, yeah, absolutely. And when the will transfers, or the estate transfers rather, they have no intention of following through on the wishes. So in this case, we would suggest taking our family readiness assessment, which is 50 questions. Those 10 questions, that's mom and dad's perspective. We have another one that's 50 questions that really gets under the hood and gets the bottom up. But we would also suggest having a third party work with your advisor to sit down in the meeting with you and see if they can help facilitate the open and honest conversation. You might need to make a list of the conversations in a family meeting and then take them one by one. Sometimes they just need answers, and hearing it from your advisor can be a great way to have that feel like an objective response, take some of the heat off. Red families, or families where they haven't come together, maybe they're joking about taking somebody to court. For us, that's never a joke. There's outward distrust. They're saying things like, I really don't trust you. We had a situation where a brother was in charge of the family estate, and one of the other brothers said, all this guy ever did was cheat in Monopoly. There's no way I'm going to trust him to run the estate. That's a conversation about distrust. So how do we get underneath that? What are the new standards that need to be put in place as adults? Sometimes there's an imminent change that's going to happen. Maybe illness has started to surface, or somebody passes on suddenly. Those are the moments where you go, we need to start taking some action right away. We suggest one-on-one interviews here. Again, an advisor can potentially get into some of those conversations, but really understand what's important to people. Then you're going to want to bring in an outside expert. You're going to want to bring in somebody who's neutral, that has the skill to keep the conversations on rails. There might also be some one-on-one coaching involved to start bringing in a deeper level of skill for people. We work with an estate attorney, and she says, I've been writing estate plans and trusts for many years, and I've learned that I cannot write an estate plan that, quote, fixes your kids. Yet many people write the estate plan hoping that's exactly what it will do. I said earlier that Roy came out of the NFL, so we have a football diagram here, but it actually works really well. You have that offensive line where the heirs are on either end. They're the wide receivers. One day the estate is going to transfer, and they'll be the ones to catch it. Inside that line is the advisor, the estate planner, there's a bank, there's the CPA, there's the lawyer. Everybody here knows their job, and they know each other's job, and they know the plan. They know the play. But the heirs, who are actually going to have to catch this estate, have never seen the playbook. They don't even know who the other players are. And the game day is unknown. They don't know when they're going to have to get into action. So this is a useful diagram, even for you to have conversations with your own kids. The trickiest part here is they're playing against these X's. So you can guess those X's are the Bernie Madoffs. They're a well-meaning church person. They're somebody they meet that's doing something interesting, and they think they want to just join in on it. We had a situation with a family. The kid was 25. He was just finishing up graduate school. Mom died. She was the only one left, and he never asked any questions. So he went back to school. A well-meaning colleague of his at school said, hey, we know some really socially conscious groups that align with your values. My brother runs the firm. Go ahead and invest there. And sure enough, he lost 2/3 of his inheritance due to that investor's lack of experience. So that happens, unfortunately. All families they kind of operate like informal teams. We don't just pass on wealth. We pass on certain communication patterns and practices that a family's in just naturally. And what you want to aim for is a better team. You want to have pretty clear roles and responsibilities. You want to have stronger coordination. One of the ways that happens is through something called the Family Wealth Mission Statement. So here's some examples of what they look like. To use our resources to strengthen our family and to support causes in which we believe. It sounds really great. It's actually a really good mission statement, because what we would then do is back the family up and say, okay, what do we mean by our resources? Does that mean my money? Is that invested in for the future generation? What are we talking about with our resources? And our resource is only money. What else could be considered a resource? We talk about family. Who is family? Is it just the bloodline, or do adopted kids count? And what happens if we get divorced? So the wealth mission statement is a really powerful way to align the family's overall sense of purpose and get everybody on the same page with the use of the wealth.
Yeah, can I say something, Amy? It's just perfect. The next slide is perfect. Go ahead. Excuse me.
Go right ahead. This is all you. This was actually a family Joel worked with.
Yeah, this was a great family. They had 3 kids. The mother was divorced in the midst of figuring out custody. The kids were 8, 10, and 12. We did this mission statement, where we bring a graphics recorder in and we start to have conversations about what the purpose of the wealth is, what would you use it for, how would you contribute it to other communities and all. And the graphics recorder was recording all of this. She was making this up as they were going. Came down because they've all put their information in and their remarks in, and sometimes they'd be scribbling on the corner of the table that they were sitting at and stuff like that. But we just let it go along. And then when we said, well, there must be a mission statement that will capture all of this and you guys could live by. And the daughter, who was 10, started writing on her own little table, and everybody else was asking questions and everything. And her mother goes over and she said, what are you doing? And she says, I'm writing the mission statement. And if you look up in the right-hand corner, that's the mission statement. And when she got done, when the graphics recorder got done putting it up there like this, she walked over and she goes, there's a wrong word that doesn't work. Can you change this word to respectfully instead? So now they have it going up the stairs, a diagram of it, this reduced, so it goes up the side of the stairs. And every now and then somebody gets to say, hey, Mom, I have a question about our gifts to help others. I have this idea. And they start, and I'm not kidding you, this was 8, 10, and 12. The young boy who was 8 said, you know what I want to do is I want to go around and buy good things and then open a store where people that don't have the money can come and buy them at less costs, so they can also have good things. Non-coached, trying to get them to say anything. I spent most of the 2 days with my mouth open in awe of what our kids can do if we just let them do it. So that's it. But we also do it with a full family. I've done what 31 or 2 family members came up with this, and it builds trust, it builds relationship, it builds vision, and it builds purpose. And all of a sudden, it also builds people's awareness that they need to be responsible for this, not as an individual only, but as an aligned family that has been given this resource and the resources that they have acquired along the way as a way of not only managing it, but also forwarding it on to other people who can make a difference with it as well and live better lives.
I think, Joel, when you said it produces alignment, I think it also produces understanding. We worked with another family where there was a mom who wanted her 2 kids to work with her on the foundation. Yeah. And one of the kids was hardcore to the right. He was very religious. He didn't really want to tap into the family wealth. He wanted to be his own man. And his sister, on the other hand, worked in a nonprofit. She was happy to take whatever wealth the family was willing to share with her. She was an atheist. Her commitment was to the LGBTQ community, actually ran a suicide hotline for them. These kids could not have been more different. Meanwhile, Mom thought it would be great if they could work together in the foundation as a way to build family unity. Well, both kids said to us, there's just no way that's going to happen. We're just 2 totally different people. And what we learned was as they went through this process of building their values, they gained a different understanding of what mattered to each other. It was less about the doing, more about who they were being in the world. So in the end, what finally happened is they aligned on improving the lives of children. The son does it through missionaries in 3rd world countries, and the sister does it through suicide hotlines and supporting the gay and lesbian community. So today, not long ago, the mom called and said that the daughter asked her brother to be the godfather of her child. So there you have it, right? Pretty powerful. What it took was just a really good understanding and really creating enough space for them to appreciate and understand each other.
Yeah, when we were doing this work, we it's not even work. When we're the guests in their world, if I can say it, we only last as long as we're going to be alive for them. I just was on the phone call with one of the kids that we started coaching 11 years ago. And they say, hey, Joel, what about this and like that? But the building the trust is the one thing. But I'll stop talking because I could go on forever about other stories that were really fun. Wait, Amy, can I ask one question? Todd, are there questions that have been sent in? I just want to make sure we have time to answer some of those, or if that works. But we can do this pretty quickly in 30 seconds.
We will have, it'll be, at this point, it'll be very few questions, but it's a great reminder, Joel. If any of you have questions, I've got a couple, but if you've got questions, what a great time at 3:39 Central Time, at least. What a great time to send those in.
Great. Okay, thank you.
And we've been known to ask all of you questions at times, so throw one out there.
When you run out of time, I've definitely got one that I'd like to ask you, but you keep going.
Oh, that's great. So what you're looking at real quick, remember I mentioned that 50 question survey. This is 6 family members. They were always trying to get to that minimum threshold of 3.0. It's based on our research, and it says at this threshold, we think you'll have the skills, or you at least have the communication skills to be successful in that transition. With 3 meetings later, this same family took that same assessment, which is how it works, and you can see they were able to see some measurable differences in working with that. What we've learned is that transitions occur more smoothly when heirs are better prepared. That doesn't mean you're putting them through a boot camp. That means you're having meaningful conversations about them, about who they're becoming in the world. That relationships among family members are trust-based, that you're centering more on the relationships than you are on the assets, and that families are proactive in these conversations. That's really essential. There's no taboo topics, so to speak.
That's great.
So that's what we have.
I also excuse me, Todd, go ahead.
Nope. Please.
Well, I think this day and age, things have changed, and I hate to use the C word, the COVID word, but I think people are left with, they need to be able to communicate with each other. And when I got involved in this with Roy, what usually caused a family to want to do the Williams Group is some chaotic or catastrophe that happened. The father got cancer, like that. But right now, people are doing it much younger. Mm-hmm. They see it as something that everything can change in a minute. And if we're not ready now, we're going to be too late. So the mood of the work and the velocity in which it gets produced and the results are generated by the family, and the alignments of the family's relationships come together much faster than they did 12 years ago or even 5 years ago. So it's not as scary as it used to be. It's let's get it done. Mm-hmm. So please, Todd.
Yep. So a couple. The first, so maybe these are even related. What if we're too late? What if the family is so fractured that it's too late to do the good stuff, to lead them towards that, which I guess is indicative of maybe relationships, or how do you step in when a family is maybe fractured?
Yeah. Excuse me. Years ago, that was pretty standard. People hated each other, but nowadays they have a way to find each other. I think one of the suggestions is that we would interview people and find out really what the background conversation is that is generating the breakdown for all of them. And then we would see if there was room to start to bring in the distinctions that Amy and I've talked about today. And would the family be interested in having at least do the questionnaire and then have a 2-hour phone call about the possibility?
I read into that. I shouldn't read into it. Something I've observed is there's a resignation that can sometimes occur that it is what it is. At this point, I don't have the energy to fight back anymore. It just is what it is.
And, I can feel that way. One of the things we like to say is that learning makes the impossible possible. So while they think it's impossible, it's because they don't have the skills to do anything else yet.
Yeah.
So if they can declare that they actually care and they'd like to repair the relationship, then we can produce miracles.
Yeah. One thing Amy mentioned earlier, we work on who they're being rather than what they're doing. It's because we suggest it's who you're being while you're doing what you're doing that determines the quality of the results, the quality of the relationship. So, and if we all just take a moment, we wake up one morning when you're in a grumpy mood, what's your day look like? Pretty grumpy. And what do? You run around looking for happy people so you won't be grumpy. And guess what? Happy people don't want to be with grumpy people. So, but we sort of start with that simple little distinction of who. So with regards to the wealth, who are you being and what opportunities or what new ways of engaging with it can you see could take place if you could have those conversations? Different conversations opens up different interpretations. And as Amy said, I think when people are stuck in that, they just don't know which way to go. And it's a really easy transition to sometime.
Yeah.
I'll say one other thing about this, Todd. Conflict tends to be circular and repetitive in families. So until the matriarch or the patriarch says, okay, it stops with this generation, we're going to learn some new ways of engaging, that conflict will be sustained. The next generation is learning how to engage with each other from the generation before them. It also tends to be very expensive, conflict.
Yeah. I appreciate your answer. Let me ask you the first of 2 more questions. Our kids have no idea how much we're worth. How do we start?
It's a beautiful question. The question of how much do I give them and when is the wrong question. That they don't know how much they have is probably a good thing at this point. What you want to do is put down a foundation before you start talking numbers. A foundation like, why do they get out of bed in the morning? A foundation like, what contribution do they want to be? What are the values of this family? Questions like, how would you like to see the wealth impact your life? So that you're starting to build more of a self rather than the focus on the assets.
Gotcha.
That's why we say, how much do I give them and when is the wrong question, because you've got the accent on the wrong syllable there.
Right.
Rather, and in families with this much wealth, the patterns of entrepreneurialism are pretty deeply embedded. They grew up having conversations around the table of how do we overcome this hurdle? Or how about we take this risk? Or what if we looked at the market this way? So they have that. It's just, have they been asked or have they been given the opportunity to say what's important to them?
We also ask two different types of questions. Most of the time when someone, to the father or the mother, would say, well, what do you think we should do? Mm-hmm. And when you ask somebody, what do you think we should do? Their past comes into their awareness. And then they're looking at, they have 1,000 things we could do. So one of our suggestions is if you ask someone a thinking question, just tell me 3 actions you can see we could take, 3 actions you see we could take that would allow that to fall into place. So that's one suggestion, and people find it useful because then they only have to talk about those 3 things. Yeah. The other type of questions that we call are vision questions, and it sort of Amy used it to answer your past question, Todd, is like, how do you, with regards to our family wealth, what would it look like to have it fall into place in a way that would contribute to the family and those around us? What would that look like?
Mm-hmm.
Different person, and then they start to look into the future, and then they start to tell you what their vision of the future looks like, and you can say, and what else would it look like, and how do you see that unfolding, like that? And it's so easy because then you talk about the vision, not if they did it right.
You may have answered the next question then. How do you get buy-in for this type of planning from a younger generation? You may have just answered that question.
I would suggest that you saw the picture of that chart, 8, 10, and 12. They pretty much know what's going on. And I do think, we also coach them on how to sort of set up, can I have a meaningful conversation with you about the family resources? And I do my best to take the wealth out of it, but the family resources, because you have a lot more resources than just the decimal points and commas, like that. So and usually the breakdowns about personalities and all of that quietly come into the room, but usually what they don't talk about in the first few meetings is the wealth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll stop talking in a minute, but there was a great study from the Boston University that took 100 families that had generated 100 million net worth. And they asked the parents, the mom and dads, why did they work so hard to generate that much wealth? What was the driving force? What do you think the answer was?
To please my parents.
No, to have my kids have a better life than I did. To have 92% of the people said that. So when we're working with families, we talk about the vision of the family, and then we wrap the wealth around that rather than trying to do it. And I know, as an advisor, and like you need to do the money part of it, but you can also say, does that fit into you? Do you see that fits into the vision? Like that. I'll stop. I'll zip it, Amy.
So there are some. I'm going to ask questions on behalf of others and maybe even to a degree myself. So I'm second generation business owner, and I remember how my father and mother, when we went through those conversations, they were lumpy and I was snotty at different elements of it. And if I could go back and do it again, I would. They probably wouldn't. I would say they probably did their best in that space. But my middle son pinned me down 3-4 days ago and said, Dad, if I wanted to do what you do, he had taken his test at school and it said, your opportunities are to be in the world of finance and to be some kind of an organizational leader. He showed really high on CEO type scores. And he said, if I wanted to do that, what would it look like? And I know on this call, there are others who have a family business that in a perfect world, they'd want to move downstream. And anyway, I won't tell you everything I told him unless we run out of everything else to talk about, but help me with what are the most important things to coach business owners who have kids, and I'll parentheses it, who may or may not have the skill level necessary to run a business that they legally have some opportunity to inherit some portion thereof.
That it's not so much what you say, it's how you listen.
Oh, I'm great at that.
Saying or listening? No, just kidding.
The same skills that built the wealth are not the same skills that give it away. I mean, that's just a thing. But what I find, because as I said, I interview a lot of these kids and they're terrified. They're terrified that they're going to have to be responsible for great amounts of wealth and that they're not going to be able to do it as well as you did. And so they live in fear. And sometimes they pursue other paths because there's no way they could compete. I'm going to go become a teacher. I'm just going to call it a teacher. That I think I can do. So rather than telling, get really good at asking powerful vision questions. So when your son says, Dad, what would it look like? Sure, you could give him a short answer of what it might look like for you, but boy, that's an opportunity to turn that question around. Hey, what do you see? What would you like to see happen?
Yeah.
Do you see my company? Do you see maybe we open a sister company? Is it in the same industry? How would you like to keep this conversation open?
And
right?
Along with that, I would suggest to make suggestions and recommendations rather than I think you should, or I want you to. One of the suggestions I have, maybe you could, as Amy just did it, I mean, maybe we could just look at it and see how this fits for you. But take you and I out and call us we. Well, let's see, how can we work together on this? All of that stuff brings the families together in the background, and pretty soon they find out they're all related and they have a nice time together.
There's one thing for sure. These kids want as much runway with you as possible. Silence is the best destroyer of family relationships than I can imagine. They want as much time with you as possible to learn how you think, to learn how you assess other people's competence, to engage with you in ways that they can learn.
Well, you use the word learning many times, and listening and everything else. So that's my notes so far. When which I hope some of the other folks on the screen have had that same joy of kind of having an aha moment. But your last one's great. Silence destroys. So I'll try not to forget that you just said that, because in my as soon as you said it, it completely resonated. The number of things not said so trumps the number of things said, by a factor. But it takes, there's a ton of intentionality. What you as you two were speaking, I was thinking, you're saying good things, you're saying actionable things, and they're really, really hard to do because you have to leave a webinar and then go do something different than you would have done if you didn't listen to this content. I did get another question, if you don't mind. We still have 4 minutes, and that's enough for a good question. Mission statement and relationships are two words or topics you've mentioned multiple times in your conversation. Do you need to address the relationships before creating a good statement or purpose for your family, or should the leaders of the family begin with a mission? Holy cow. I don't know who asked that question, but yeah. Speak to that. Do you want me to read it again, or did you hear it?
No, I got it. And it's a great question. You have to address the relationships first. If you go straight for the mission statement, what you'll get is people saying yes, because it's not safe to disagree. Yeah. So you absolutely want to deal with the relationships first. Some organizations will help you build a mission statement, and that'll be mom and dad's vision. And those kids are going to listen to that like mom and dad's mission statement. Like, I don't have to do anything with that. So we suggest deal with the relationships or learn some new skills to take the great family to the next level of great. If we could, we'd teach these skills in grammar school. Yeah. I would say make an investment in the trust and communication, and then the mission statement will emerge in a much more collaborative way.
That's great question, great answer. It reminded me of something. I mean, there was conflict, productive, but it was not easy in our family's history. And I just remember my dad coming to me at one point, and I share it with anybody that's listening here, is he did something, and this won't be exact, but it's close. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please forgive me. I love you. And there might need to be some repair work relationally that occurs that allows an arrogant son like me at that time. Maybe I'm still arrogant. But that allowed an arrogant son like me. It diffused a lot of tension that then allowed, okay, we knew we're going to work through this, and you're going to spend your life working at Brand Asset Management Group, but we got to at least make a run at relationship because it's the very first thing you all said. And in fact, I'll take issue with your survey. I love your survey, by the way. I took it and I got a 7 for what it's worth. But the first time I saw your survey, I got a 5, and I thought I'm going to be on this webinar. I got to cross a few things. But it says, is wealth as important as unity? And I would go, is family unity is it more important that we have family unity than it is even that we are successful? And from a heart position, I would go, on my deathbed, I want my kids to go, I love you, Dad. I don't want them to go, thanks for all the money, big guy.
Warren Buffett said something like that. A young kid said to him, how do you define success? And he said that at the end of the day, the people who you want to have love you.
Yeah. So, well, I appreciate, I don't know you well enough to go, I love you, but I would if I knew. I appreciate both of you very much. Your expertise has been beneficial to me long before this presentation, and I got 17 actionable thoughts coming out of it, and I hope that the others of you who joined us for this did as well. So thank you for your time. There's a guy named Craig in the background running the tech on this. So Craig, thank you for your time on that, and thank you to our team that helped pull it together. So as a reminder, this is a prelude to something that we hope to do in a live format, and between now and then we're excited to talk to each of you who are participants on this webinar about how and if taking another step in this direction might be the right step for you. So Joel, Amy, I can't thank you enough. Your wisdom is palpable. So have a great rest of your day, each of you, and we will. Well, look at that. It's 400, which for those of you that know me well, never actually done something in 1 hour.
Way to go
on the button. So quick before it says 01, Craig, shut her down.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Thank you. It was great.